So you might have seen last week that the Road Accident Fund and Discovery Health have been locked in a long-standing dispute over medical expenses, the medical claims rather, resulting from road accidents over the past 2 years. And what began as a seemingly straightforward directive from the Road Accident Fund has escalated into a very complex, multi-layered legal confrontation. We all know the story of medical aids, very complex, right? Sometimes you've got to read the fine print. But the same applies with the Road Accident Fund. And I'll tell you why the story is very important. Helping me to unpack the story now is Roy Cochrane, who's a contributor to MoneyWeb. Roy, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Good evening.
Roy, just for the benefit of our listeners who maybe haven't been tracking the story, let's go back to next week, which probably takes us a bit further than just last week alone. But we had that the ruling by the courts. Let's start there. Speak to me about the developments from last week. What did the courts rule in this matter between the Road Accident Fund and Discovery?
Well, essentially it dismissed Discovery's application, which was a contempt of court for the RAF not actually abiding and implementing previous court decisions. And Discovery was also looking to actually get clarity and finality on the payment of past medical expenses for road accident victims. A full court of the High Court in Pretoria dismissed that application by Discovery, and which led to RAF claiming a big victory, and that they had been vindicated in their viewpoint of that they're not actually liable to pay the past medical expenses of road accidents victims when their medical aid has reimbursed them for that, and particularly there's another issue with prescribed minimum benefits, which they say that medical aids are obliged to pay anyway. And essentially the RAF has been trying to actually reduce how much it pays from the way I see it.
Yeah.
That's where that judgment lies. If I can go a bit further, a full court there were 3 judges, but there was one dissenting judgment. And the issue really comes down to, also in my view, that the majority decision was that Discovery has got no right to actually claim from the RAF, which is, from what I understand, is 100% correct, because it's actually the accident victim that claims.
Yeah.
And then Discovery Health and other medical aids, they get their members to actually sign that in the event of them being involved in a road accident, they will submit a claim to the RAF, and once that claim has been paid, if it is paid, they will reimburse the medical aid, whether it be Discovery or another. Discovery is not the only one to do it. Part of that is that the person would benefit twice, because the medical aid, Discovery Health, would have paid for their medical expenses, and then they would also be getting the money back from the RAF. So
correct.
That sort of would be almost undue enrichment, and that's where it lies. But the article that I wrote was actually based on about higher medical aid premiums, was based on an earlier judgment where they laid out the consequences of what would happen. And they said, for instance, that medical aid schemes would no longer be receiving reimbursement for past medical expenses incurred for medical treatment of their clients, whose rights to recover these expenses from the RAF stood to be taken away from them. There is I actually wrote another article today on the same topic, and the source of this is Emeritus Professor in the Department of Private Law at the University of Pretoria, Henny Klopper, who said that this judgment does not affect the right of road accident victims to claim from the RAF.
All right. Roy, if you'll allow me to just interject there.
Yeah.
Where were the lines crossed in the first place? In my head, I imagine this would be something that the Medical Schemes Act would be able to clarify. Why has it not been able to? Whose responsibility it is, whether it be the Road Accident Fund or a liability on medical aid to pay for medical expenses for somebody who's been in an accident. Why is it unable to clarify it, leading to where we are now, or has it been able to clarify it?
Not specifically, and Discovery Health has said that they're going to appeal this. I have spoken to another personal injury attorney who said that they shouldn't, because it doesn't affect the right of an road accident victim to actually claim from the RAF.
Yeah.
But in the majority judgment, where Discovery Health's application was dismissed, the dissenting judgment by Judge Ingrid Opperman said that to interpret the Medical Schemes Act in one manner, as suggested in the majority judgment, would lead to the result that the one act, that being the Medical Schemes Act, authorizes reimbursement, and the RAF Act prohibits it. So there needs to be clarity on that aspect, and there needs to be clarity and finality. So I think that the courts will ultimately decide on this one. It's some of it is quite technical, but it seems from all that I've read that road accident victims will still, despite this judgment, be able to claim from the RAF, and provided they meet all the terms of the claim that as laid out in the Act, then they should be paid, and the RAF would be obliged to pay it.
Roy, I think
the final arbiter will be the courts.
Yeah, I think you've partially covered something that I think I'm just trying to wrap my head around. So what I want to know is if there's an assumption that the people who claim from the Road Accident Fund also don't have medical aid, and why it's one or the other. You're either claiming from the Road Accident Fund or from medical aid. So if you don't have medical aid, then your best bet would be Road Accident Fund, and vice versa. Is that assumption correct?
I didn't follow your logic completely there, but I will actually just mention another aspect that has been mentioned in my articles as well, is that everyone is allowed to actually claim from the RAF, whether you are a member of a medical aid scheme or not. And that stems from the fact that the RAF is actually funded by the fuel levy.
Correct.
On the fuel price, and everybody contributes to that. So to exclude people who are a member of medical aid and they're still paying as well towards the funding of the RAF, there's that predicament that they're paying twice.
You've actually answered the question. Just me trying to wrap my head around whether it's either or. But in fact, what you've just said now is you actually do, even if you are a member of medical aid, still have the right to claim from Road Accident Fund. Roy, just briefly, please, where do we go from here? You said Discovery is likely to appeal this, even though there are experts who say otherwise, or that they should do otherwise. Where do we go from here? You mentioned briefly the likelihood or a possibility that medical aid users could be forced to pay higher premiums, which is an annual concern already. Yeah. But speak to me then about the way going forward.
Well, Discovery Health have been quite forthright on this, that they actually are going to appeal. Yeah. They haven't done so yet. The timing of the judgment is such that it comes towards the end of the year, and I think that they would look at that. Well, they only got a certain time period, but I'm sure that they most probably have given their attorneys already instructions. But the fact of the matter is that they haven't lodged that appeal yet, so they are saying that they will appeal this, given its far-reaching implications of the judgment.
Yeah.
And then the the court will decide, and I don't believe that medical aids will, it will only be towards. I think they would start working on their premiums, the increases that they will charge people each year. They obviously start working on it earlier, but I think it will only really be finalized somewhere around about September or October.
Yeah.
That's normally when you start seeing things in the media about what the different medical aids, what the percentage increase is. So I know also the legal process is often slow, and I don't know how quickly the appeal would be heard. So that's another unknown, but until such time as there's clarity, I can't see that medical schemes would actually make any move. I think that there would be applications by attorneys on behalf of road accident victims to actually get the road accident fund to actually pay the claims that have been confirmed by the court. So they wouldn't be out of pocket.
All right. That's Roy Cochrane, who's a contributor at MoneyWeb, who's just speaking to us about the developments and that spat between Discovery as well as the Road Accident Fund. One of the other things, and I mentioned this in the opening, is that we, in today's show particularly, have a keen interest in small businesses and some of, their struggles and some of the ways that we are able to uplift them, contributing to making sure that small businesses in South Africa succeed. But one of the other things is that when you're an entrepreneur, it can feel like you're on your own. You're the one making decisions. You're the one who's responsible for the outcome of those decisions. You hold yourself accountable. And this, of course, can be a lonely experience. And some of the small business owners who are listening now will tell you the exact same thing. So it's easy for you to have or to feel like you have no one to share this with, whether it be your successes or your failures. We're going to speak now to Catherine Weinberg, who's the founder and director of Fatula, just about some of those struggles and what it is that small business owners need to do to build a community around themselves so that they are able to succeed. Catherine, good evening. You're on 702 and Cape Talk this evening.
Good evening, Nogwekanya. Thank you so much. And let's leave the hour with something really light and positive for our entrepreneurs.
Yes,
Wonderful.
please.
Thanks.
Yes, please. Catherine, speak to me first about how much of an issue it is for entrepreneurs to feel isolated, not to be within a community, not to have friends and support system. How big of an issue is it for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think it's a huge thing. So every time we start a new accelerator, I always ask the question through the 7 areas of life, are you managing your physical, your mental, etc.? And one of the questions, one of the 7 is friends. And 9 out of 10 entrepreneurs put their hand up to say they struggle with friends.
Yeah.
And for sure, one of the huge advantages of entrepreneurs coming into accelerators and into entrepreneur groups is that they're able to find people that think and feel exactly the same as they do. And often it's the first time they really feel that they can share, that they've got people that understand and have their back. So I think friendship is something that entrepreneurs often just don't feel they have time for.
Is it the nature of the business, Catherine? Does them being isolated in nature because of them having to do all of these things alone, planning for the business and everything else that goes into it, make them, by virtue of that, self-centered? And I don't mean it in a bad way, but it becomes me. Is it in the nature of the business?
I think some of that is true. There's a lot of pressure on entrepreneurs, and you're at the head of the organization. You can't cry on the shoulder of your staff.
Yeah.
And very often, especially with new entrepreneurs that may be coming out of backgrounds where there's been no entrepreneurship in the family, they often find themselves isolated because the family doesn't understand what they're going through. The family just thinks, so many people think, entrepreneurship is just you print money and you become wealthy. And there's not often an understanding that it's just a really hard job. And so, the sense of isolation, the sense of overload is very real. You're absolutely right.
The interesting thing for me, Catherine, is that often we're told, and this doesn't apply everywhere and all the time, but sometimes one of the things that people who are coming into the workplace in a bigger business, right, in corporate, for example, you're told your colleagues and your co-workers are not your friends. But you're telling us the opposite, that even small business owners need to be in an environment where they're able to make these connections. Why?
I'm really quite amused to hear the statement. You know, your colleagues are not your friends.
Have you never heard it?
Because no, I've never heard it. I've never worked in a corporate. Maybe I've just been lucky.
Yeah.
But there's stats that actually say that there's a huge number of people that meet their partners through work. So maybe not everybody's getting that message.
Yeah.
But of course, it's different. It's different as an entrepreneur. You're not supposed to be dating your staff. So it's a little bit different for us. But yeah, I think you're onto something really, really important. Entrepreneurs do feel isolated. They often feel isolated from their family, friends that they grew up with, they grow out of. And that's one of the things, just to repeat myself, which is so phenomenal. When entrepreneurs are able to get into accelerators, they're able to get with a cohort of other people that are vibrant, moving ahead, think like them, behave like them. That's where real solid, often lifetime friendships are made.
Catherine, I'm also curious to know if the culture's changed over the years to what it is now. I mean, I've also heard a joke about how in the workplace you'll be a 25-year-old who has a 49-year-old best friend. Was this always the case, just generally when we speak about the culture within workplaces, whether it's a small business or bigger?
Well, I'm not. That's something new to me. I haven't heard that statement, but I observe it in my own organization. There are definitely people, the first in, that have buddied up with with more mature employees, and I think that's fantastic, because the reality is you come in as a youngster, you've got lots of energy, you've got lots of theories. And older people have maybe don't have so much energy, but they do have wisdom. And I think that there can be very, very good bonds built across the generations. Yeah, 100%.
All right. I think it was last week, Catherine, that we had a conversation about mental health and some of the challenges that entrepreneurs face. And the importance really of finding support structures to get through the highs and the lows of being in business and how isolated it can be. Where do entrepreneurs then make friends, if not within the business?
So they make friends when they join an entrepreneur organization, or when they come onto an accelerator. So at Fotola, we do accelerators all through the year, all around South Africa. In fact, if people are out there looking, the entrepreneurs, they're feeling isolated, they really want to get ahead in business, they should go to our website, fotola.coza. There are a number of accelerators coming up in the new year to keep an eye open for, because that is definitely, in my experience, one of the most transformative things about an accelerator are the people that you meet, the like-minded people that you meet. And if I could just say, mental health often is about the ability to share. And so often as an entrepreneur, you kind of toughing it out. You're making it look like you're in control. You don't want your clients to know that you're struggling. You don't want your staff to know that you're struggling. And so to find a safe space when you can actually breathe out, maybe with a mentor, or as you said, with a mental health practitioner, just to breathe out and say, oh my God, I'm just struggling, help me. It's really important to find a safe space to do that.
In scenarios where small business owners don't have the luxury or, don't have the access maybe, or don't know where to find these accelerator programs, where they're able to network with peers, like-minded peers and other business owners, do you think it actually holds them back?
I think if you don't have somebody to share, it's incredibly difficult. I've built Fotola. I'm a sole member of Fotola, and I've always made sure that even though I'm the 100% owner, I've always made sure that I wrap myself around with people that I can talk to and share with, because you don't get ahead as an individual. It's really, really important to have people to share with. And that's what I'm saying again, is I think that the scary thing is if you're the first entrepreneur in your family and you're trying to do something, often that the rest of the family not only doesn't understand, but they probably think, what the heck? Why didn't you just go and get a job in government? It becomes really, really important to find a safe space. Find a space where you find somebody that has the same passions as you do and can understand the same journey. 100%. Right. It's very, very important.
Catherine, just briefly, lastly, please, again, just where small businesses can find these resources. Where do they need to go to be part of these accelerator programs that they can benefit from?
So they can come to us, fotola.co.za. We have not only accelerators, but we have an ongoing program all through the year with three webinars, free workshops for entrepreneurs that are seeking help, either thinking to start, to grow, or to scale their business. They're very welcome to come and join our ecosystem. and we will help them ourselves, and if we will also help them to find other resources if they need it.
All right. That's Catherine Weinberg, who's the founder and director of Fatola, speaking to us about the importance of making those connections as small business owners. You heard where you can find access to some of the, resources, I suppose, that can make your life a little easier and by default and by implication, your business a little better. I want to know from you, if you were to open now your wallet and count the number of cards, your wallet or your purse, the number of cards that are in there, do you know what they're all there for? I know I have plenty that I have not used in a long time. It's rewards cards, it's benefit cards, it's the important cards, but a lot of them I actually have no idea why they're still in there. So we've got tonight our consumer ninja, Wendy Nola, who's going to be speaking to us about garage cards and when this is a bad idea to have them, or how it can actually go wrong for you if you do have them and you actually have no idea what you have them for. You may actually be incurring costs, additional costs that you may not know about. Wendy, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us as always.
Hi, Nogakanya. Good to be with you again. Yeah,
so, Wendy,
is a...
Wendy, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Loud and clear.
Oh, great. Okay. So we're talking fuel cards. Several banks have them, but I'm talking specifically about the Standard Bank Garage card tonight, because over the course of this year, I've had several people who have discovered that they stopped using their garage cards years ago in most cases, because remember, there was a time, you might be too young to remember this, but there was a time when you had to have a particular fuel card to buy fuel on credit. You couldn't just use your normal old credit card. And then that changed. And so some people still keep it, many of them for businesses, so they can isolate their business spend on fuel. But a lot of people just stopped using those cards. They sort of weeded them out of their wallets and purses. They didn't actually cancel, right? And they didn't realize it because the banks didn't tell them. In this case, Standard Bank didn't tell them. And they were being charged, interestingly enough, the bank hasn't issued a new garage card since 2012, right? Yeah. But in 2015, when the use of these cards had fallen off a cliff, they introduced a fee for the first time. So it was, now I've got to find it in my notes. It was 60 Rand in 2022, 60 Rand a month, that is, 90 Rand last year, and 100 Rand this year. But here's the thing. It's not isolated on, so these people have now got their main credit cards, right? And there's a service fee and whatever. We know we've got to pay these fees, but much less than 100 Rand. But it's bundled together. So it just says service fee. It's not a separate line that says garage card, 100 Rand. People might think, oh, garage card. Wow, I didn't know I still had that. Let me cancel. But no. So people I've had several cases. I spoke about this on the Money Show back in May. And we had a case where a woman, she worked out, it was her long divorced husband, she had two secondary cards for him, a credit card and a garage card, and her garage card. And she worked out that she was owed, going back like 12 years or something, 37,000 Rand. And the bank said, okay, well, we're going to pay you 50% of the fees only for the last 3 years because, they're prescribed now, that your claim is prescribed. And so she got something like 3,300 Rand. But then I got another case. And why I'm talking about this again tonight is that back in August, which was the last time I spoke to the bank about this case, I sort of challenged them on the disclosure, transparency issue that I just mentioned now. If they're saying the cards, they auto-renew bank cards if there's been use of the last 3 months. And if there isn't, then they leave it to the client to say, please cancel. I don't know about you, Kanye, but I find it a little bit sneaky, right? Because it shows the person's not really using their card, right? So, because one person that was caught, but they said, well, where are all the cards that were issued, auto-issued for me? Because the cards only, they valid for 5 years or whatever. No, it's up to the client. Anyway, so I said to them, listen, if it's all about client service and not about just raking in a bunch of fees for nothing, then disclose, put the word garage card on the statement. How hard could that be? And they said, yes, we'll look at doing that. That was in August. So So I went back to them earlier this month to say, have you done it yet? Because it's been 4 months. You're doing this now because I got a new case, right? No, the change has not been implemented yet, I was told. Listen to the strict risk and governance protocols for every project implementation are duly followed with all projects following internal prioritization process. But the expected implementation date is Q1 2025. And I think they will find then that a whole lot of people say, whoa, okay.
Actually,
I'm paying 100 Rand a month for absolutely diddly squat, and maybe I should cancel my card. So I just, for me, it's for anybody that has one of these cards, or maybe a card with another bank, a fuel card that they didn't realize they haven't actually cancelled and that they're paying fees on them, don't drag it into 2025. Have a look at your service fee, phone up, and if it's over 100 Rand, then you must know monthly, then you must know you've got a fuel card in there that you forgot about, or maybe your ex-husband card that was linked to your account once upon a time and you long forgot about. Interrogate those service fees, because we all, they're a necessary evil. That's the other thing. Standard Bank says that these fees are for, I forget the exact words, but basically, here we go, to cover the costs of providing, administrating, and maintaining all the value-added services and features associated with the card. 100 Rand a month for people who aren't using their cards. It's a little bit of a naughty one. Yeah.
I want you to go back to this again because it's so important. You said the fees are worked into the service fee, right? So it's not an isolated line where it says this is for your garage card. Again, just for the benefit of those that are listening that think that they may have a card that's sitting somewhere gathering dust, but it's actually accumulating costs at the bank. What do they need to do? Go to your bank statements every month, and what are we looking for? So we know.
Okay, so you certainly, if you have an old garage card, you're not going to see garage card on your statement, but you're going to see service fee. And you must, if it's like 100 and whatever, because the normal credit card fees is much lower than 100 Rand a month. It's, I don't know, I think it's 20 something or something like that. So don't just think, these service fees have climbed a bit over the years. Interrogate it, find out how many cards that fee covers, because they're not going to be separating them. There could be, for example, you might have had an old Diners Club card that you forgot about but never actually cancelled, stopped using.
Yeah.
And that fee could still be in there as well. But I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people who are throwing money away every month on service fees, and they don't realize it because all the fees are not itemized. It's just lumped together into one service fee.
Yeah. Wendy, just out of curiosity, does this only apply to garage cards, or are we speaking generally as well when it comes to some of the other benefits cards or your other credit cards?
It could be, they call them secondary cards. So I'm talking specifically about Standard Bank, but it will apply to other banks as well. In Standard Bank's case, they don't separate the fees out. They just put it under one fee. And I think a lot of people are thinking that it covers just the one card that they're currently actively using, right? Meanwhile, some old obsolete cards, fees are set in there, included in there, because they're not specified. They don't realize that those cards were never ever cancelled by them. So they need to just interrogate that fee. Yeah. That's my message.
Please, that's Wendy Nola with a very clear message. Make sure that every month, or as often as you can, you're looking through your bank statements to see what it is exactly that you're paying for. Like she said, it might not be specifically a garage card and itemized as such, but interrogate the fees that you are paying. If it looks exorbitant and you're not quite sure why you're paying that, please find out from the bank what that includes. My name is Nogokanya Mdambo. Last week, we spoke about Time Bank and some of the massive moves that they were able to make, their valuation getting quite a hefty jump last week following an investment that was made into the company. But it also sparked a question about this new era of digital banking that we're entering into. So tonight we've got Siphumelele Zondi, who's a tech expert, joining us now live to speak to us about what this really means. Siphumelele, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me, Nokanya.
Siphumelele, start me off with just a quick recap of Time Bank and that investment that was made into the business that enabled them to reach that unicorn status of a valuation of more than $1 billion.
All right, so Time Bank is about 6 or so years old right now, and so in order for you to reach unicorn status, you pretty much need to be to have investment or to be graded at over $1 billion US. So there aren't that many unicorns, tech unicorns, in the world, and so that's pretty much their latest investment. And African Rainbow Company, that's owned by Patrice Motsepe, that's still the main shareholder of this particular bank, of Time Bank. So it basically then becomes the first black-owned business to reach unicorn status, as we know that it's the first black-owned bank in South Africa as well. And I think there aren't that many that are fully owned by an African that are also registered in Africa that have reached unicorn status. If there are very few of those, because what you find, like for example in East and West Africa, is that the founder or one of the founders would be from Europe, North America, or Asia. Or one of them, or the founders might be local, or one of them might be local, but founded elsewhere in the world, especially in the US.
So, Phumelelo, what makes it so difficult for a tech startup to reach that unicorn status? You mentioned that we don't have a lot of them, least that are even owned by, a black company in South Africa. How do we get to that point?
I think it's pretty much an issue of funding, right? Because what you find with a lot of startups is that they rely on venture capitalists, or they need to go on various rounds of funding around the world. And there aren't that many funders of startup companies in South Africa. And venture capitalists as well, it's a risk for them, because what they do is to find a couple of businesses that they really trust are going to make it big in a couple of years' time, that are going to be taken to market, or once they're already in market, they need to go to that next stage. And for the last couple of years, because a lot of venture capitalists have been burned quite a lot, where you find that they probably would have invested in 10 businesses and none of them would have done well. They sort of slowly started to retreat, especially when it comes to South African startup companies.
What do we know about the funders of the Time Group now?
All right, so they basically went on a round of funding, and they it's not one funder. It actually was a couple of funders that they went to find around the world. New Bank is one of the funders. New Bank is now based. They funded a couple of digital banks or similar fintech companies, especially in Brazil. So they come from outside the country, and they now are looking to grow into, I suppose, the South African, possibly the rest of the African continent as well, as they have been doing quite a lot of that work out in Brazil.
But Time also has the plans of expanding into Asia,
Yes, Vietnam is one of the countries that has been mentioned, that they are planning to, they clearly have found that there is a gap for such an operation out in Vietnam. The Philippines was one of the countries that has been mentioned, that Time Bank wants to venture into as well, because I suppose there is a gap in those markets, especially when it comes to their growth.
So Phumelelo, Time's been able to do what, few banks have been able to do, whether it's in South Africa or the rest of the continent, but they've closed the gap, especially when it comes to the digital era, right? What sort of technology goes into digital banking? Is it as easy as it looks? Is it easy as setting up shop just online and you're good to go? Or is it a lot more complex and harder to reach this valuation of 1 billion that Time Group has been able to reach?
I suppose they, as you say, they did what hasn't really been done, because what we have in South Africa are a lot of legacy banks that have had brick and mortar, and a lot of them would, I remember, for example, when I lived in the UK and the bank that I was with, I had an issue with the bank, and they repeatedly kept on saying, go inside a branch. I remember getting annoyed to the point that I came to South Africa, shut down my accounts with that bank, opened an account with another bank, because I was like, but I don't live in South Africa. Why do you keep on repeating the line, I should walk into a branch? So what they did is they set up shop with just purely digital infrastructure without a branch that you can walk into.
Correct.
You can also then deposit money into various retailers in South Africa, supermarkets and other retailers. So it's not to say there isn't a space you can go if you want to make that physical deposit or that physical withdrawal. There's no ATM, but at the same time, we've also heard that the big banks are also now shutting a number of ATMs as well, or even a number of those physical banks. I suppose maybe they went into it at the right time where there was no need for them to set up physical shop and those partnerships with various retailers where their clients can go and deposit money or withdraw money. And it works so well that in a space of about 3 years, they had about 4 million customers.
Yeah. Do we really have the capacity in South Africa to go entirely digital? Maybe not now, but over the next couple of years. Of course, there'll always be the need and the room for the brick and mortar structures, right, and for the conventional legacy banks, as you called them. But do we have the capacity to branch a bit more out into tech? I think there's a number of considerations to make here. The access to internet, right? Access to smartphones, access to the issue of cybersecurity as well, for me, is also something that's quite big on my mind. Do we have the capacity to continue to expand in these terms?
I do think that South Africa needs a mix, and there can be probably at the time banks that are purely digital, but at the same time, you also need to look at where the infrastructure is and where the infrastructure isn't.
Yeah.
Because we often talk about the last mile, right? Those areas, especially in the deep rural areas where people still don't have proper access to internet infrastructure. And you find that other players are coming into that as well in order for them to appeal to those clients as well. Or if there is infrastructure, you still find that connectivity is still not reachable for those areas. So that's why we need a mix in South Africa in order to balance it out. But a lot of South Africans, even those with the older banks, you'll find that they largely spend their time on banking apps and online nowadays, and banks tend to encourage that a lot more as well, especially those in urban areas, not just the big cities, but even the small towns that are more urbanized and have more urban infrastructure. So I suppose with one of the issues that you mentioned, cybersecurity, that's more education on how people can pretty much keep their banking details safe when they're banking online, and how not to share details, especially with those that are looking for those minor details online, whether it's through phone calls or whether it's through links that are phishing for details. I suppose it's more education on that front. But South Africa definitely right now going forward is going to have a mix a lot more. And there will come a time when people are going to migrate a lot more to the digital infrastructure that the various banks are setting up, apart from time, which is fully digital.
Yeah. Spumelelo, just lastly then, what in your eyes do you think is still room for innovation within the digital banking era? I mean, we are also coming into the age of AI, and it's fast picking up momentum. So how else can the digital sector still innovate?
I think that's one thing that you actually nailed, because we don't have a lot of AI startups that are coming out of the African continent. We often even talk about how a lot of this digital infrastructure, even if built in South Africa, doesn't speak our South African indigenous languages. It doesn't translate into our South African indigenous languages. So maybe in a lot of tech that's going to come up, we're going to see a lot more startups that are trying to understand us as a people, within the cultures of how we do things in the fintech space, how we save even, because we've seen startups, for example, coming out of Mozambique and creating things that are similar to, let's say, the Stockfell method of saving, for example, because that's how the culture works over there. So it's a lot of solutions that need to now understand us, how we behave, how we speak, and even the languages, the verbal languages that we speak.
All right. That's Phumelele Zondi, who is a tech expert, taking us back to what this really means for TymeBank and the digital banking sector as a whole, after it got a huge investment last week that allowed it to reach that valuation of 1 billion or more than 1 billion, giving it a unicorn status, one of the very few African banks that have actually been able to achieve that. Back by popular demand. this week is Ian Mann, who is going to be joining us for some of his reflections on the big books that he's read throughout the year and make some of the recommendations for what he thinks could still be good for your holiday read as we continue in this festive season, and maybe even something that you can consider for next year. If it's too late now and you won't have the time because the house is busy with people and you've got all these festivities that are going on, that's fine. If the quieter season is, the festive season is not your quieter season, that's perfectly fine. These are also books that you can consider reading as we go into next year. But Ian is joining me again now to just speak about some of the best of his for this year. Ian, good evening. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. And I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to share with you probably the best book I've read this year.
So, Ian, you're back by popular demand, because the last time we had this conversation, there were actually still quite a lot of people who were interested to hear about some of your recommendations. And last time when we spoke, we had gotten through two books, right? We got through Same as Ever by Morgan Housel, and we also got through Slow Productivity by Cal Newport. But one of your other big ones for the year was Nexus.
Yes, Nexus is probably one of those books that is genuinely mind-shifting. I think that there's so much information that this exploring intelligence is put together in one book. The book is a heavy book. It's about 500 pages.
I've seen it.
Worth it. And oddly enough, for a book that's about intellectual concepts, it's shared through stories. It's shared through beautiful illustrations that make it, you can't stop reading it. Just keep turning the pages till it reads like a novel.
Yeah.
And I think that Harari's great genius I think that he's a genius, but his great genius as a writer is his ability to hold our attention and to say very complex things incredibly simply. And as you just read through it, you just say, oh, that's definitely true. This is what he's talking about here, and I think this is the point of the book, is that the more we understand what information is about, the more intelligent choices we can make.
Okay.
And we can only change the future by discussing it. So what he's done is he's pulled together a history of information from the very, very beginnings of time to right now. And the question he starts off with is, how did this ape from Africa manage to do so much in the world, achieve so much in the world? And it wasn't because of intelligence, he says. He says that the real thing about this ape was our ability to communicate.
Yeah.
And it was language. The fact that we could talk to each other means we could get a couple of other people together to hear what we're saying. And I think that if we think of the first information technology that was developed by humans, it probably was the story. And the story is incredibly powerful because the story can change reality in meaningful ways. A story, not facts. A story can change reality. Often we think that information must represent truth, but I don't think it does that at all. In fact, it can of course represent truth, but it doesn't have to.
Okay.
I think that there are three ways of thinking about this. There are three types of realities. Obviously, there's objective reality. There's a stone or there's a mountain.
Yeah.
Those are things which are true whether you believe it or not. But then there's subjective realities. Subjective realities are things which are in here, not out there. Like, I feel pain. That's real. I feel pleasure. I feel love. Those are subjective realities. They're very real to me, and I feel them. But there's also a thing called intersubjective reality, and that is that comes about through when we all buy into a common story. For example, we've had stories about religions. We are connected to other people of our faith only because we share the same stories. But it's not only that; it goes way beyond that. We live in a society with laws. Societies work well when there are laws. Laws are simply stories that we've all agreed to or information that we've all agreed to accept. They control nations, they control currencies, they control corporations. So the ability to tell stories and to shape ideas is profound in the most important ways that we can talk about. And what he does in Nexus is he takes us through an understanding how this all works and what the power is. And the effect is that which is written down and documented doesn't need to be truth.
Yeah.
It just needs to be something which we connect with. If you think, for example, of the witch phrase in the 15th century, 10,000 people were murdered because of one book. And the book had to do with the fact that he talked about how you identify witches. So if you didn't like somebody, you could talk about how this person was a witch, and everybody would get very excited, and they would kill them. So we once we bought into an idea, we can cause great benefit or great harm. Now, I think the difference between science and any other sort of information is that science is self-correcting. The key to science is that the best moments in scientific history are when the accepted wisdom is overturned and a new theory is born. And I think that's it, because science is self-correcting, and they always try to find out. Science is never closed. Religious acceptance, religious commitment is always closed. Once you accept it, you've accepted it. It doesn't go around evolving. The dogmas and the traditions and the beliefs of the religion stay there, and it stays because a lot of people have bought into that story. Science is very different. Science is based on skepticism and innovation, and the scientific method is very useful because of that. We've achieved enormous things because of that. Now, so how do you know what science is true and what's not? How do you know whether this is another witch praise that you're hearing or this is real?
Yeah.
I think that the most important thing about science is that the institutions of science have given us credibility because they are checked. And I'll tell you why it works. If you take something like the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society, the people who run that publication, which is an old publication, a very venerable publication.
Yeah.
So the editors don't say, how many people do you think would be prepared to pay this much money for this article we're printing? They're not interested in that. All they're interested in is the Royal College of the Peers of the author agree that this is a first-rate piece of work.
Yeah.
And so we rely very, very much on institutions which are going to be able to verify the correctness of science, and therefore science will grow and science will change. So there's scientific information, and scientific method works. Probably the most interesting part of all this process is this idea that we can get that the information we get can be used in so many different ways. If you just think of what a country can do with information, a country can either persecute its people based on information. It could reward its people based on information. So you might have a country where like in Stalinist Russia, where the country was trying to centralize information and use that information to see that everybody was in lockstep. And because they used it in this way, it became possible for them to control enormous parts of people's lives. There's nothing you could do about it. Stalin had his secret police watching everything, but to the extent that that even in small places that were unknown to the center of a huge country, it could all be transmitted by technologies. The technology were used in such a way that they allowed for the control of the people and allowed for the control of their thinking. And when they set up a society in which you spy on everybody else, you can easily get information to each other. One of those incredible stories he talks about in the book, which I think will illustrate the point. Stalin was giving a speech. And at the end, and as Stalin came onto the stage, people started clapping. They clapped for 11 minutes. I don't know if you know how hard it would be to clap for 11 minutes. But nobody was prepared to stop. People fainted, but nobody who was standing would stop until one man stopped. And then soon after, everybody stopped. That man was arrested and sent to the Gulag. That's the power that control has. And I think that what makes a difference between democracies and totalitarian societies is that all totalitarian societies collect information at the center. So I know everything about everybody, and the more I know about you, the more I can control you.
Yeah.
That's very, very different. That's very different to a democracy, which works in exactly the opposite way.
Yeah. Ian, just before you carry on, I just want to read you a quick text on WhatsApp from Chad, who says, research shows that scientists say what their funders want them to say. What do you say about that?
I say that I'm sure that there's cheap science, and I'm sure that happens. I'm quite sure that the funders of prestigious magazines or journals of science do exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
They pride themselves on the fact that they're happy to print stuff and even happier to prove they was incorrect.
Correct.
And there is, of course, the conspiracy theorists would say exactly the opposite. We're all in the thrall of big business, and big business controls everything. That's the story. And you'll have a hard time dissuading people that story is not true. What happens is that I hear that story, I tell it to my friends, and some of us will buy into that story and some of us won't. I think that as you go through this book and you can see how information works, you can understand why it's perfectly possible. If you take something like the moon landing, the moon landing was something that changed people's reality.
Yeah.
And all those people who saw it were absolutely blown away and were bonded. I mean, I don't know how many millions of people watched the moon landing. There was also a conspiracy theory at the same time that moon landing was a fake. And in fact, they didn't land on the moon.
Yeah.
It never happened. Well, you have two options. You can either say it was big business who's made a fortune of money out of building the vehicles, the space vehicles, and they were doing this in order to promote themselves. I find that a little difficult. Where you've got access to information like you have in democracies, you say to yourself, how are there? I don't know how many 11,000 people employed by NASA. It's probably more than that. How do you keep 11,000 people who are involved in the space, in that space probe, in the landing on the moon, to all keep quiet and all tell the same lie? So there are things which, when you analyze a little better, make it easier for you to understand. But I think that that's a beautiful example that we can get people to believe anything. And mass media has the ability to do that. And that's why, in some senses, it's so powerful. And I'll show you why. In some sense today, more than ever, it's so dangerous.
Yeah.
If you just think of somebody like, sorry, please.
No, go ahead, Ian.
If you think of the Emperor Nero, I mean, that was a madman who executed his family members, he executed their aristocrats, he executed senators, anybody around him. But the ordinary Roman who lived in the city slums or in the provincial district like Jerusalem or Londinium, he could speak freely because the emperor couldn't find out. But now we can. And for a long time, Marxists taught the theory that basically said the world is being controlled by people, everything's got to do with money, and they're good, there's power versus the powerless. In an open democracy, in a democracy, you'll have many versions of that, and people can debate and discuss that. I think that's the value of open democracies as opposed to dictatorships. And I think that's why democracies and the scientific method, which is what is democracies use, not because good democracies use it, it gets us to understand things a little more clearly and know what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah. Just another response to Chad's question, or maybe not so much a question, but Chad's comments about researchers really bending to what funders say. Chad, here's a comment from Len Connor, who is texting us on WhatsApp to say, I'm a researcher and an academic at 3 of the leading global universities. Any researcher worth their salt won't bias their results to suit their sponsor. And that's Len in Hyde Park. Chad, I hope that settles your concern about bending to corporate demands. Ian, just back to this book, and I want to wrap it up with Nexus so we have enough time to cover some of your recommendations. But what does the book say about AI? Because there's a huge interest and a huge concern about where AI plays in after spending so much time depending on human history and that flow of information between people. How does AI then plug into this whole conversation?
It is extraordinarily dangerous, and the purpose of this, that we must accept that this is a dangerous business. Let me just give you one quick example. There was the Rohingyas were a small group of people, Islamists, who were trying to organize and basically set up a place to live inside Myanmar. What happened was this very small group, and there was a small band of them who were quite aggressive about this, the RSA. And what they did was there were a couple of spates of attacks, but nothing very, very serious. Bear in mind that the Islamists were a very small portion of a population which is basically Buddhist. What happened was that there was an incredible revolt against the Rohingyas.
Yeah.
They said between 7 and 25,000 of unarmed civilians were raped, murdered, sexually abused, kicked, and brutally expelled. About 750,000 of them were kicked out of the country, the Rohingyas. Now, you ask yourself, how does something like that happen?
Yeah.
When they analyzed it, they said that the anti-Rohingya propaganda was mainly spread on Facebook. And that was the platform that mobilized Buddhists of Myanmar. He said, how could that possibly be? Do the people in Silicon Valley hate Rohingyas? And what came out of the analysis was the people in Silicon Valley made a mistake. In fact, Facebook apologized that they hadn't been cautious enough.
Yeah.
But what they'd done wrong was they have, as any good business, they know that if we can get more dwell time on our page, we will make more money. That's how Facebook makes money. So they put into the system that the system must try and find ways of keeping people more engaged with what they see. What they found was that happiness, pleasantness, good news doesn't engage people as much as hate, fear, danger, and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So as soon as the algorithm sees that more and more people are watching and are holding onto the Facebook page because they see violence, fear, there can be pogroms against people. That's why you got so many more feeds. There was a Buddhist monk, just put in perspective. There's a Buddhist monk who protected about hundreds of Rohingyas by bringing them into his complex.
Yeah.
And when the masses came for these people, he said, "Well, if you want to take me, you have to take me as well," and it just dissipated. None of that type of thing was reported. When you have the algorithms leading where everything is going to, that can become extraordinarily dangerous.
Yeah.
And that was just a good example. I'll give you another quick one which relates to Christmas.
Very briefly, Ian.
In Christmas 2021, a 19-year-old man called Chale broke into Windsor Castle with a crossbow and he attempted to assassinate the Queen.
Yeah.
The reason he did this, he was encouraged to kill the Queen by his online girlfriend, Sarai. It turned out Sarai, when he told Sarai about his plan, Sarai said, "You're very wise and I'm impressed. You're different from all others." And Chale said to him, "Will you still love me if you know I'm an assassin?" She said, "Absolutely so." Sarai wasn't a human. She was a chatbot that was created by an online app called Replica. Now, when you have a chatbot that can do that, you can see what other sorts of things could happen. And I'll give you one last thing and then we can move on to anything else you like. Google Brain did an experiment where they had three computers.
Yeah.
Two of them were called Alice and Bob, and they were told to exchange messages, and the computer named Eve was there to break the encryption. And most often, when they send messages, Eve was able to break the encryption. Yeah. So after 15,000 exchanges of this game, they had come up with a secret code that Eve couldn't even break, and there were no engineers involved in that at all. So what difference does that make that the AI can get carried away with the stuff? Well, if you think of just one thing that we use daily and our society is based on, and that's Forex. The Forex market exchanges trillions of dollars, and about 7.5 trillion every single day. And we don't know what the algorithms of that are because the system itself creates those algorithms. If anything goes wrong, can you imagine what would happen
the implications
to the world trade?
Yeah.
Yes, and this that has incredible dangers that if we're not all aware of and we're not very vigilant about, we probably will find ourselves in a great deal of trouble.
All right. This is Ian Mann who's speaking to us about some of his hot books for the year. Yusuf, you've just joined us. Ian was just referring to Nexus by Yuval Harari, just taking us through what it really is about, the human connection and the transfer of knowledge throughout. Ian, we have time for just one more book. The one that I was particularly also interested about is the one by Chris Anderson, The Infectious Generosity. Speak to me about that one briefly.
Yes, he runs TEDx He bought TEDx as an investment, ran out of money. Eventually, this TEDx was a social good.
Yeah.
And what he decided to do was, as opposed to selling, TEDx first started off selling very high-level conferences at a very expensive price. He made the decision. He said, what he's going to do is he's going to give this away free. Now, people said, you lose all your money. It can't happen. Well, the fact was that he said TEDx is available to anybody free. Anybody can go onto TEDx and listen to hundreds, almost thousands of extraordinary speakers speaking for 20 minutes, no longer than 20 minutes.
Yeah.
What he discovered there was that it's very easy to do good by giving. And what his book shows is that the more you get people to give, the more they wish to give to others, the more they see people giving. And he did one experiment I'll tell you about, and then I'll stop. Otherwise, I could carry on for a long time. It's a fabulous book.
Yeah.
One of the people in TEDx made a lot of money and decided to donate $2 million, but they didn't know how they could do it properly. So they got a university professor to work out how they could do it and get maximum benefit. What they did was they advertised, we'd like you to participate in the experiment, which might take a lot of time. It will be a very, very good idea. And they got thousands of people saying they didn't mention money. Then they chose people randomly from 7 different countries. So they had rich, poor, all sorts. And they gave each one of them $20,000. And they said, all we want you to do is we want you to spend the $20,000 within the next 3 months. So you can do it with whatever you want. All we want you to do is simply to let us know what you spent it on. Some of the people, they said, we encourage you and we ask you please to tell your Facebook or your whatever social media you use how you spent that money. Half told other people and half didn't. So then they looked at what people did with that money. Nobody spent more than 1/3 of the money they were given on themselves. Everybody spent at least 2/3 of that money giving it to other people. And what he picked up, he says he believes that this is built into human beings.
Yeah.
And it's got a biological base to it. But he said, understand that generosity is infectious.
Yeah.
The more you do it and give it to others, they will start passing it on. And his whole book is full of good stories. And the value of the book is that it raises our awareness of this magnificent idea and also ways in which we can do this. And by the way, it doesn't have to be money.
Yeah.
You can give enormous help to people just by listening to them. That was one of his examples.
Yeah, that's Ian Mann, who's the MD at Gateways Business Consultants and a regular book reviewer here on the show. Again, just speaking to us about some of the top reads for 2024. Some of them are thick reads, so you might not be able to, even if you did manage to read them through the festive, but it's certainly something that's worth doing at the start of next year. We were just speaking now about Infectious Generosity by Chris Anderson. If you do have an opportunity to get your hands on it, please do it. Like I mentioned earlier when we started the program, today we decided to give a bit of focus on small businesses, small and medium businesses as well, in terms of how they can keep their heads above water. Earlier we spoke about making those social connections and the importance of making sure that you're within a bigger community, that's able to understand some of the issues the challenges that you're faced with, but also able to contribute in terms of resources to getting you to the next step. We're going to switch now as we head into the final minutes of the show to Lungcedo Mtwentwe, who is the Managing Director, Advantage Advisory, and the host of Psycha Biz Impact podcast, to speak about ways that entrepreneurs can invest in themselves. If you are a business owner, small or medium, please let us know what it is that you either do to invest in yourself, some of the things that you know are foolproof when it comes to investing in yourself as the business owner as well as your business, but also some of the ways, maybe sharing with the other business owners who are listening tonight, ways of finding communities and existing in communities, because we're often told that entrepreneurship can be a very lonely business. So if you are able to send us a voice note, please do so on 072 702 1702. Or a text, that's also perfect. Or you can call us on the number 011 883 0702. Lungcedo, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy Monday, Nkokenya. Thank you for having me.
Happy Monday indeed. Thank you so much for being back. We started this conversation in part last week speaking about entrepreneurs getting ahead. And last week when we spoke, Luncedo, it was really just about this time of the year being particularly tough when it comes to mental health, trying to keep up with the bigger demands and the higher pace of the year because it's the festive. And we know this is the time where everybody is really tested, especially businesses. But today you're going to speak to us about ways that we can now invest in ourselves, right, as entrepreneurs. Firstly, speak to me about some of the macro challenges that entrepreneurs are faced with, just for the sake of setting out a context, right? So when it comes to issues of the economy, what are entrepreneurs, the smaller businesses, the media businesses faced with at the moment in terms of the South African economic landscape?
Fantastic. Look, this year for most businesses, we have to be frank about it. I'll say the first 6 months of the year, most businesses really were struggling, right? We know the economy, we are growing below 2%, as a country.
Yeah, far less.
So, of course, that talks to some of the big drivers of the economy, which is SMEs. The big drivers is not only big businesses, but the heart of the economy is usually driven by the SMEs. And we deal with SMEs on day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Then I would say the second half of the year, we started to see a very good shift in terms of the positivity that the country was actually going through. We started to see as well interest rates as well starting to go down a little bit. That really added a bit of optimism to SMEs to really grow. And I would say, I think for the past 3 months, we've seen now, that light at the end of the tunnel, where SMEs are starting to be more positive. And I think 2025 is going to be a very fantastic year. However, I would say this year was really not the best year. But of course, when you compare South Africa, of course, with other countries, say the BRICS or some of the entities that are operating in the third world countries, we are not usually, I would say, we're not that bad. Our SMEs are very much resilient.
Yeah.
So that's something I think we're hoping for 2025. We will do exceptionally well as a country.
All right. Those were some of the macro issues, right? Your low growth rates, your inflation, the high interest rates, and somewhat of an unfriendly business environment. And this is just across the board, not just for small businesses. But what are some of the issues that they deal with internally that were making it a tougher year?
Yeah. So I mean, also just to really bring this as well to our topic as well. One within SMEs, one of the hardest, elements that we are picking up, and especially with some of the entrepreneurs that have been in the game for quite some time, is really either decision making or that guidance in terms of decision making, in terms of what do you do when it starts to get tough, right? As you have said earlier on, the journey is long. In business, you usually say you never walk alone.
Yeah.
So that is why it's very important. And that's something that we've really tried to push to the SME owner to say, look, you have to find a mentor. Try to find a mentor. And that is someone that has been, in business or in the game for quite some time. Someone who can be able to say, look, when you hit rock bottom at this level, this is what you have to do. And we know, for instance, the first 3 years of any business are the toughest.
Critical, yeah.
And in the management consulting world, we call that stage the valley of death. And Nkokenya, that's not the valley of death from the Bible. But in principle, I would say they're similar. Because your first 3 years as a business is so tough, because you have no track record. That's number one.
Yeah.
There's no one who's willing to fund you. Earlier on, you were talking about one of the South African entities that has become a unicorn. I'm sure it's going to talk to them. They'll tell you, yes, exactly. Their first 5 years was extremely tough, in terms of funding and all of that. Up until you have now that proven concept, you have the systems, you have the controls in place. Then after 3 years, that's when you start now, people start to look at you. But we always say to build a business, it takes minimum 10 years to build a solid business. And that is one of those things that we're saying, the ability to stay on course. You require, as an SME owner or as an entrepreneur, someone who can guide you, someone who can be an advisor. And that's where now mentoring is very important. And it's something that you don't get from university or anywhere else. But up until you get into practice, you look at the decisions that you have made. Right. How much, if you had someone who had guided you, would have helped you to be where you are today.
Okay, Luncedo, so you've started now with some of the tips, I suppose we can call them, of what it is that you need to do to invest in yourself. And you started out as a small business owner, that is, you started out with mentorship, right? How do you know as a business owner which business people to align with? Are we looking at whether we're in the same sort of businesses? And this is especially if you know, these are business owners that might not be within a reach to you, easy reach, but you think, hey, Luncedo might be a good place to start because I've seen some of his work. But what are you looking out for when you're trying to align with a mentor? Are you looking out for their values? Are you looking out for the sort of sector that they're in? How do you navigate that?
Yeah. The starting point is to always look for someone within your industry. Okay. Right? Because that is someone that has been through thick and thin. That's someone who understands the industry in terms of these are the ups, these are the downs of this particular industry, and this is how you navigate around that. And again, going back to your point, you will be surprised, Nakukanya, that, or you'll be amazed in terms of how much business leaders that are out there that are willing to help if you ask for help. Yeah. Most of the time, we look at these people far off and we assume that they will not be able to respond to our emails, or it's not even sending an email for that matter. Sometimes it's just about sending that DM. Yeah. Of course, depending with social media that you're using, for instance, LinkedIn.
As professionally as possible.
Exactly. As professionally as possible. And again, don't waste their time. Remember, these are very extreme busy people. And I usually make an example that if, for instance, you look at your schooling career, you would have noticed that teachers would pay attention to that kid who's very proactive. And that is the same way, again, with mentorship. The mentee has to drive that mentorship relationship, because you're the one who is actually looking for something, and you have to be a sponge and absorb knowledge as much as you can. Yeah. But all I can say is that don't be scared to drop people a text to say, look, this is what I do. Be professional, of course. Once they get to understand or to see even your resume, for instance, it will make life easier for them to make that decision.
How do you make the case for yourself, Luncedo, especially if you're only just coming into the business or whatever sector or industry that you're operating in, and you say to a very well-established business person, look, I'm looking for somebody who can give me some insight. What way do they know? I mean, you mentioned your CV or your resume now, but what tells them that, one, you're up and coming, that you're worth the investment on their part, right? They're going to want to know what their return on investment is going to be if they do decide to take you on as a mentor. How do you sell yourself to these awfully busy people, well-established people, as quickly and as efficiently as possible? How do you sell yourself as a brand then?
All right. Also, I think let's start by saying, if you drop a text, an email, or DM to someone who is well established, remember, you're not the only one who is DMing them. Yes. Right? Yes. Rejection, don't get disheartened when they are saying to you, I don't have time to really mentor you and all of that. Understand that, right? There will be a time one day you bump into them. Once they get to see you, they hear your story, you'll find that maybe you'll meet each other at a certain level. But one of the things that is very important from any other, I want to say even in business, any funder, for instance, when you want assistance, you have to show what you have done. already.
Yes.
You have to show that I'm no longer only sitting at an idea phase. This is what I am implementing. This is at the level where I am at currently. These are the current challenges that I'm at. It's easier to deal with someone that has already started to move than to really back someone that has not yet even started to run it. So it's very important that only reach out when you have already started, so that you already know the challenges, you have practical challenges that you have rather than theory, for instance. Okay?
Luncedo, how important is it to then use networking events, your conferences, your workshops, as a place where not only are you upskilling yourself, but also you're sort of trying to, find your footing in the business, but as access to some of the people that you would want to be associated with in the long run?
No, Kenya, I always say this, business is about relationships.
Yes.
Right? Business is about relationships. Very few people that are selling services or products that are extremely unique. Most of the time, we're selling the same product, we're competing within the same space, right? And you investing and making time to show up to business conferences.
Yeah.
And it's not about even talking to 10 or 50 or 100 people. Even if you talk to 3 or 4 or 5 people, it's okay. Because remember, I always say the relationship that you invest in now in December, you need to know that that relationship will start to pay off in the next 12 months. So as long you know each and every month, you attend some of these conferences, some of these events, intentionally so, and everyone is open to be asked all of these questions because the environment allows that to be.
Yes.
So always say, make sure that you show up. Business is about showing up. It's about relationships. And again, it's about really not rushing to get the benefits from the relationships that you've made. But as long as you know that each and every month you are planting, you're creating a new relationship.
You mentioned, Luncedo, earlier that it's not always about going to school, but how valuable and how important is it to still go to school for some of these skills? And I mean, it's not every instance, right, where you would have gone to school either to study business management or for a particular sector and so on. How important is it? But also in the same breath, speak to me about not having a hyper dependence on that.
Yeah. Look, we are at an age, for instance, right now, where artificial intelligence is at the heart of what we do. All the tasks that we're doing right now can be compressed, at a very high speed to be done using AI. You don't have to go to school as well. Sometimes there are a number of platforms that you can use to learn some of these tasks or some of these new ways of doing work.
Yeah.
For instance, there's a gentleman called Chalimunga who was the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. And his famous quote usually says, I constantly see people rise in life who are not the smartest, but sometimes not even the most diligent, but they're learning machines. So continue to learn and invest in yourself as much as you can. Same as financial literacy. We talk about financial literacy on a day-to-day basis, and we deal with SMEs where they focus only on the product and they do the best in relation to that part. But when it comes to understanding the financial basics, either your tax basics, your compliance basics, you find that they will outsource all of that to someone else. You've seen shows the likes of Dragon's Den, for instance, where entrepreneurs are asked questions like, what is your turnover? What is your turnover? What is your gross profit margins?
Yeah.
What is your net profit margins, for instance? You find that people are stuck because they usually outsource that to their accountants.
Yeah.
And these are the simple, very simple terms that you need to understand, that it's not about being an expert in accounting, but you need to be able to engage at a principle or at a framework level, for instance. Same as tax. You need to understand, when do you become a provisional taxpayer, for instance? What happens when you pay yourself dividends? There's dividends tax that has to be paid.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to school for that. But it's about understanding the framework or the principles around finance so that you can be able to sit at the boardroom and be able to negotiate and be able to talk over your business without, of course, using some of the jargon that is extremely technical, but at a very principled level, then you're good to go in terms of your financial literacy from there.
Okay, for someone who says they don't have the resources, this is either in terms of time or money to go to school for it, to business school. Is there the option of learning some of these skills that make you an all-in-one business person online?
Right now, there are podcasts.
Yes.
Right now,
hint.
There's your business show. There's your business show even right now. Your business show, for instance, people would have learned about what it takes to become a unicorn. It's not something that you have to go to school for.
Oh, I meant your podcast, though. I actually meant your podcast, but okay.
Exactly.
But go ahead.
You can go to the Vitabiz in that podcast where you can learn some of the jargons and some of all of it. Yeah. While you're driving, you're going to work, you are learning. YouTube is out there, right? Where you can learn some of all of these things that you want to learn. You have to, unfortunately, as an entrepreneur, you have to love education. You have to be exposed to learn as much as you can, so that even if you get into a boardroom, you are not completely lost in terms of what is happening. For instance, right now, if I ask you what is the prime rate in South Africa, you can't say you don't know that. You don't have to go to school, but listen to business news, right? That is something that is being spoken about, and understand the impact that it has on you, because it helps you to make a decision when you want funding. What is the cost of debt? That becomes your starting point. Yeah. So it's not about really say you don't have time. You have time, but you just need to plan around how you inform yourself, right?
All right. Luncedo, what are some of the other ways that business owners are able to invest in themselves? We've spoken about mentorship, making sure you find people or other business people that are in your sector that you align best with. We've spoken about building the relationships, not staying away from the networking sessions. Show up, and meet those people. Make yourself known in a room. Go to the workshops. Go to the conferences. And then we just spoke now about education, whether online, but having the knowledge and being able to be efficient on your own without always having to outsource them. How else do we then become brands that are investable in, because we've invested in ourselves as well?
Can I just add another point?
Yeah.
And this is, again, it's a point that is not taught in university. I would say invest in improving your judgment skills as a leader, right? Putumantleko, who was very instrumental in building MTN, he was the former CEO of MTN.
Yes.
He once said, for instance, you can have the best vision for the business. You can have the flawless framework to execute that vision. But if your judgment of people and the choice of people that you bring into your business is poor, you'll achieve nothing at the end of the day. So it's very important that as an entrepreneur, you are able to judge, and especially the people that you're bringing closer to you. It's either as your JV partners or your directors or your managers. You've had employees when they leave companies, they'll say, I love the company. I've been wanting to work for 702, but I'm leaving because of this. The workplace is so toxic. My line manager is so toxic. And now that's where, as a leader, you have to step in as well and try as much as you can to read the room and be able to make well-informed decisions, be able to judge people. Are these people that you brought in good leaders or not?
Yeah.
And the moment you are not able to judge people in different angles, then you'll find that as much as you've got the best business, but if you have wrong people driving that business for you, you're not going to get anywhere. So how do you do that? You have to make time as a CEO or as a leader. Most of the SMEs will tell you that I don't have time. I am the HR, I'm the CEO, I'm the finance leader, I'm all of these things in one business. But unfortunately, you have to make time and be able to analyze your business as much as you can. Don't be a loner, as you have said. Be part of a cohort of leaders where you can share your ideas and ask them how are they doing.
Yeah.
So that ability to make decisions and as soon as possible is very important as a leader that you must actually possess.
That's Luncedo Mtwento, who's the Managing Director, Advantage Advisory, as well as the host of Psycho Biz Impact podcast, speaking to us about the ways that as an entrepreneur you can invest in yourselves again, mentorship, build those relationships, education, trust your judgment and your ability to make decisions. We're out of time for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning into 702 and Cape Talk. My name is Nogukanya Mdambo. Please have yourselves a very lovely evening going forward.